Santana galloped off the field at San Jacinto on the fastest horse he could find. His destination was Vince's Bridge, which Deaf Smith and his fellow scouts had demolished earlier that day. Unable to cross Sims Bayou, His Excellency could not swim and was deathly afraid of water. He abandoned his horse and spent a miserable night hovering in the swamp. On April 22nd, rebel search parties scoured the countryside for Mexican soldiers who had escaped the battle. One of these discovered Santana crouching in the weeds and took him into custody. Because he had been careful to strip himself of all signs of rank, the members of the search party could not know their prisoner's identity. Not until they observed other Mexican prisoners paying him deference did the Texians realize they had captured a high-ranking officer. Only later did they learn that they had captured the highest-ranking Mexican of them all. Texian soldiers roughly hauled Santana before the wounded Houston. Through an interpreter, Santana complimented his rival.
That man may consider himself born to no common destiny, who has conquered the Napoleon of the West. And now it remains for him to be generous to the vanquished.
Houston snarled.
You should have remembered that at the Alamo.
Houston, however, did not execute Santana, although, to be sure, many of his soldiers urged him to. Ever the politician, he realized that a captive tyrant could be a powerful diplomatic card. Furthermore, Houston feared that Generals Fiesole and Urrea, who still greatly outnumbered his force, might launch their own attacks. Texians had achieved a minor miracle. Their general doubted that they could do it twice. In return for his life, Santana dispatched orders to Fiesole to retire to Victoria. In consultation with his subordinates, Fiesole had already made that decision, independent of Santana's orders. On April 23rd, news of Santana's defeat and capture reached Fiesole at Old Fort. On April 25th, he called a council of war at Elizabeth Powell's tavern. Urrea and the other generals present agreed to establish communications with the Mexican government. At that juncture, the movement was a strategic withdrawal. Fiesole had every intention of continuing the campaign after the army had regrouped and refitted at Victoria. Now that the Mexican army was in full retreat, Texas officials could take advantage of the opportunity that having the Mexican dictator in their clutches provided. On May 14th, 1836, ad interim President David G. Burnett and the captive Santana signed 2 treaties at Velasco. The parties agreed to release the public treaty immediately. The other, a secret covenant, would go into effect only when both sides had satisfied the terms of the public treaty. The public treaty contained 10 articles. They specified that hostilities would cease. Santana would never again take up arms against Texas. Mexican forces would retire to a point below the Rio Grande. Mexicans would return all Texian property they had confiscated. The belligerents would exchange prisoners on an equal basis. Officials of the Republic of Texas would return Santa Anna to Mexico with all convenient speed. And the Texas Army would not approach closer than 5 leagues to the retreating Mexicans. The secret treaty contained 6 articles. They specified that the Texas government assure the immediate release of Santa Anna with the understanding that he attempt to procure acknowledgement of Texas independence from the Mexican government. Santa Anna swear never again to make war against Texas. Santa Anna give orders for withdrawal of Mexican troops from Texas. Santa Anna work to have the Mexican cabinet receive a Texas mission favorably. And Santa Anna would work for a treaty of commerce and limits specifying that the Texas boundary not lie south of the Rio Grande. On May 26th, Velasco, in accordance with the public treaty, began the retreat of the Mexican army toward Victoria. Yet, what awaited the Mexican soldados was worse than anything they had experienced. During the march, it began to rain. By the time they reached the San Bernard River, the boggy ground made any kind of travel all but impossible. The Mexicans called the area the Mar de Lodo, the Sea of Mud. Men sank to their knees. Each step became an ordeal. The men began to jettison everything that weighed them down. Shells, round shot, canister, and even entire boxes of nails. To make matters worse, many came down with dysentery. The Mar de Lodo sapped what morale the army had left. Velasco always maintained that it was not the rebels who defeated the once proud Army of Operations, but the inclemency of the season, made still more unattractive by the rigor of the climate and the character of the land. Consequently, Velasco retreated not only to Victoria, but across the Rio Grande. Many in the army condemned his actions, but there was little doubt that he had made the prudent choice. Fearing that President Burnett might release Santa Anna, rogue elements of the Texas Army took the dictator into their own custody. All of this against the orders of Burnett and his cabinet. The army steadfastly refused to follow the commands of the civilian authorities. It became a real possibility that a military cabal might soon take control of the government. The actions of these firebrands prevented Burnett and his officials from carrying out the terms of the secret treaty. But it was a moot point. On May 20th, the Mexican Congress declared all of Santa Anna's acts done while a captive null and void. Both governments violated the Velasco Treaties. Notwithstanding Santa Anna's facile assurances, the government of Mexico refused to recognize the independence of the Texas Republic, nor acknowledge its southern border as the Rio Grande. As far as Mexican officials were concerned, San Jacinto was merely an unfortunate setback. Tejas was, they asserted, still part of the Mexican Federation, a state in rebellion perhaps, but nonetheless one they would reconquer as soon as circumstances permitted. The war was over, at least for the moment, but hostilities were not. The independence of the Texas Republic was far from secure.